Good afternoon, it's the 18th of September 2012, it's just gone noon. Myself, Louise and Brian Gerrish are here in Plymouth, as always.
As always, sunny Plymouth, I have to say. So the weather forecast for today is sun at the moment, but it may rain later, as yesterday, or indeed we might have rain and mist. So that's the forecast.
Thank you, Brian. And a happy birthday to friend of the show, Mr. Ian Crane. Happy birthday, Ian.
Which we're very happy to do,
yes,
because a few people have pointed out to us that UK Column Live is usually dealing with very serious topics, and we're very happy to prove that we do think about other things, and we do have a sense of humour.
Indeed.
And we would like to recognise Ian Crane's birthday.
Yes.
Excellent.
Happy birthday, Ian, again. I'm going to kick off.
Well, we've got a mixed bag, haven't we, altogether?
Really
we've got some overseas stuff as usual. We've got some particularly interesting information around David Cameron and defence, which surprisingly seems to have popped up after the UK Column's recent reports.
We've got a bit on Blair.
We've got a bit on Blair, and eugenics is a subject which is slowly but surely becoming more and more in the public domain, and somebody's pushing it there, and we'll be having a look at that as well.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get a bit of time in for some vaccine news as well, but there's so much to go through. I'm going to kick it off. Over Twitter last night, there was absolute uproar after it, on camera, was it was filmed that a Labour MP for North Ealing, Stephen Pound, appeared to be fast asleep, whilst a Rotherham MP, Dennis McShane, was asking the Defence Secretary about the two deaths of Sergeant Gareth Thursby and Private Thomas Rowe on Saturday. Mr Pound, who's 64, who is a shadow minister for Northern Ireland, appeared to close his eyes, and if you have a look on the screen, there he is, sitting behind Dennis McShane, and really, I think it's quite disgusting personally. You know, this is serious issues. These wars, these two young men being killed, and our MPs sitting there falling asleep behind. And you noticed something interesting as well, Brian, on that video, that picture we just had up down the bottom. It says BBC Democracy Live. We had a little discussion about that a moment ago.
Well, absolutely, because I mean the whole thing is a lie, isn't it? Because this gentleman's sleeping, and he may have closed his eyes for a second, but what it really reflects is the fact that in Parliament at the moment we are not seeing any substantial and proper debates over serious things happening. The thing we were talking about yesterday, but it's still a vital thing for people to understand, is that basically the democracy has been stripped out of Parliament. Decisions are not being made in Parliament with free votes, and what's really happening is policy is being driven in, and MPs are then simply doing as they're told. So,
and a story coming up that I've actually got is policies aren't even being decided by the MPs; they're going out to individual organisations and think tanks. But we'll get onto that in a minute.
Yeah,
but Mr. Sorry, Brian.
No, I was just going to say. So if people haven't looked at this, they might choose to go and have a look at BBC. But of course, it isn't democracy. And the story isn't really about this man sleeping. We might be outraged about that. I'm going to say he might have closed his eyes for a few moments but still be thinking about what was being said. Some people do that. But the key point is that we've got young men and women dying, and there has been no substantive debate in Westminster as to whether these young men and women should be committed to wars overseas.
Well, he has said he's denied he was sleeping. So, but it has caused outroar, and I'm pretty disgusted as well, because it's a serious issue, because I'm very against these wars and everything else, and that's just showing a bit of disrespect as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, well, if we move on with some trepidation.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Blair, I mean, he thinks people are going to be listening to his voice, but the BBC listened to him yesterday on Radio 4 in the Today programme. He says we must ratchet up the pressure on Assad, and I'll just read what he said. Mr. Blair. We've got to look very carefully to what more we can do to ratchet up the pressure on Assad and the regime, because I know people say, well, look, inevitably he will go, but I don't think it's inevitable. Actually, unless we prepare to make it clear that our support and solidarity for those that are struggling against what you know is a very brutal repression, now that I can't get my words out. Yeah, now that support will continue. I personally think it would be very tragic if we lost sight of what is happening in Syria. And this is Blair, who is actually responsible for the thousands of deaths over the war in Iraq. He also says one possibility he cited was zones of immunity, as have been posed by the Turkish government, which is struggling to cope with the influx of Syrian refugees. And I said to you, what would your thoughts on the zones of immunity? Do you think these are just sections of areas where they're going to agree not to?
I think they're going to say that they're going to protect people who are trying to escape from Syria.
Yeah.
But the goal is very clear, and Blair is telling us what it is, and that is that Britain, America and Western powers are adamant that they're going to continue the attacks on Syria until yet another national leader is disposed.
And continue funding.
Why should Britain and the British public listen to this man who's clearly been involved in lies over weapons of mass destruction in Iraq?
Yep.
He's been a so-called peace ambassador, but ever since he's been in the job, we've seen more and more violence.
Absolutely.
Perhaps he's behind the violence, or is it a coincidence? I don't know.
Who knows? But it's
not good.
Not good at all. No. So that's my bit on Blair. It links in quite more on the Middle East, to do with Iran this time. There's nothing in the British press about it at all. Martin Indyk, who's a former ambassador to Israel, is predicting that war within Iran is going to happen as soon as early 2013. He said there is still time, perhaps 6 months, even by Prime Minister Netanyahu's own timetable, to try to see if a negotiated solution can be worked out. And he said this on CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday. I'm pessimistic that if that doesn't work out, we need to make every effort, exhaust every chance that it does work. Then I'm afraid that 2013 is going to be a year which we're going to have military confrontation with Iran. And Israel continue to put pressure on the US to take greater action against Iran.
Yeah, well, again,
so it's just heating up.
My point remains that we are not seeing any proper debate in Parliament. So at the moment, we can say every single British MP who is not calling for proper, open and recorded debate in Parliament on these very serious issues is part of the problem. And since they're not meeting in Parliament, who are the people that are deciding to take this country into the next war?
Well, there's not one single even mention or question by any British media outlet on this story.
No.
So, I mean,
they're
we
part
don't know
of it, are they? Maybe.
Well, it's all the big names, isn't it? Media, etc. I think it's your story next.
Well, it ties in really because the Telegraph has been reporting that David Cameron could be the guilty man of history if he fails to protect the UK, and ex-military chiefs are warning about this. It's quite interesting because the UK column has been pointing out for years, and it is literally years, that Britain's military capability is literally being dismantled. All three parties are working to a common political agenda to do this. But of course, we're now in this extraordinary situation. As we mentioned yesterday, where on one hand, we've got people like Tony Blair absolutely whipping up more violence overseas. And of course, an inevitable effect of that is greater animosity shown towards UK. And then what are we doing? With the other hand, we're actually cutting back on men and equipment, which obviously makes it more dangerous for the troops in the field. But also, we're now getting to the point where Britain, as a nation state, cannot defend the country alone. The Telegraph is picking on David Cameron, but of course, David Cameron has only been continuing policy that we've seen through Blair and the Brown era. Now, what's interesting is that in this story, they're talking about this organisation, which is the United Kingdom National Defence Association. This little organisation has been in existence for several years. It was set up So it says in order to actually defend British armed forces, to stick up for them, to speak out about defence cuts. It's got some 8,000 members. I think I'm roughly correct in that figure. And the Telegraph is saying here that a recent report by this organisation is pointing out all of the dangers of what's going on.
Right.
Now, to some extent, this is true, but it's interesting that if we have a look at some of the names connected with this, obviously we've got some very, very senior retired military people from all three services, and I have no doubt that the majority of them are certainly standing up for the armed forces, and that they're very concerned about what they see happening. But I think that the big problem is that these gentlemen, as informed as they are on normal military matters, simply don't understand that the attack on Britain is coming from our own politicians. And there's one man listed at the top, Admiral the Lord West, who I think requires a little bit of extra attention, because this gentleman has had quite a special career. He was Chief of Defence Intelligence. He was promoted in 2002 to First Sea Lord and Aide-de-Camp to the Queen. And then in 2007, he's suddenly selected by Gordon Brown's Labour government to advise, well, in fact, he was Home Office Minister to advise on terrorist threats against Britain. So it's very interesting that this man can come out of the military and the next minute he's fully integrated into Blair's, well, the Blair-Brown administration, which has caused untold damage in the world and the British military. BBC picked up here, I think this is dated 2007, where he's quoted as saying that the battle to deal with radicalisation in the fight against terrorism could take 15 years to achieve. And Admiral Sir Alan West blamed jihadists outside the country for influencing young Britons. But here we've got Britain whipping up the hatred overseas. And also
funding the so-called freedom fighters of these countries as well.
Well, that has now been absolutely proved. Yeah. And in Libya, UK Column Live has shown that David Cameron and others within the Cobra planning team were using millions of pounds worth of Libyan currency to help support the so-called freedom fighters.
And Patrick's come out and said it about Syria as well from his
so the same pattern as Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, etc. So this man is speaking out about this, but he's also urging British people to become snitches, and he says this is un-British, but local people should be reporting on others. And I wonder whether his real objective there was something to do with anti-terrorism, or was it actually to help the breakdown of the cohesiveness of Britain? So I'm really not sure what this man's agenda is, but of course there's more to him. He's been speaking out on Libya, and here he is with the UK ambassador to the US, Christopher Meyer. And in this interview held by the BBC, these two men are actually saying that we should get the Arab League firmly behind the drive to take over Libya. So here is this man in the background helping to foment further aggression and wars overseas, and yet he sits in the UK NDA camp as if he's there to protect the interests of the British military. And this also broke all over the papers at one stage, that he was very fond of parties, and he was photographed. Well, we've got this one on screen of him playing the pirate at a party, and there are some others which were entitled Naval Manoeuvres at another bash with the raunchily dressed Australian author Kathy Lette, if that's the correct pronunciation. She's got her suspenders on, and this gentleman is a man being put forward to advise on the security of Britain. And I think something's wrong at the moment.
I do, definitely.
But this is what's really happening, which you've picked up on.
I have picked up on this. Really, you're more the expert to talk about it, but I will share with everyone my findings. Francis Maude. has commissioned a think tank called the IPPR, which stands for Institute for Public Policy Research, and they are committed to combating inequality, empowering citizens, promoting social responsibility, creating a fair and sustainable economy, and revitalising democracy. That's that word again. He wants to look at department secretaries completing some of the ministerial jobs. So Bob Kerslake has given the go-ahead to this, but said the final decision lies with ministers. He basically wants to change, there's that word again, into change the civil service. And yeah, Bob Kerslake's endorsed the concept of policy being undertaken by outsiders, but has stressed the final decision must rest with ministers with the advice from civil servants.
Yeah.
So Kerslake again, bringing in outsiders, a bit like our police force, bringing in private firms to tackle it.
Yeah.
Now we're going to be having this company, and they actually bid for this contract, IPPR, with 20 other bidders. They won it, and it was a £50,000 contract.
Yeah. Well, IPPR has been around for quite a long time. It's in the background. You say, what is this organisation?
It's a think tank.
Well, what is it? Is it a think tank, or is it actually driving a political agenda? And who's really paying for it? We've got political charity Common Purpose have been involved with IPPR people. We've got Demos have been connected. So we've got, you know, really extreme left-wing organisations connected with this think tank, and yet it's being brought in to actually drive change in policy.
Yeah.
I make the point again, where was the debate in Parliament that we needed to have our civil service changed?
Yeah.
And also, who is actually bringing Francis Maude and Robert Kerslake to account in what they're doing at the moment?
Yeah.
You can see that we've got the Cabinet Office and the Cabinet Office Leadership Committee, which is using French expertise to introduce behavioural change, psychological behavioural change programmes. We know that there was dirty dealings behind the scenes to get Common Purpose a contract to effectively change the views and values of the top 200 civil servants, and Francis Maude has consistently refused to release the contractual details of that arrangement. And now we've got Common Purpose man Robert Kerslake coming in to tell us that we're actually going to change, you know, how the public sector works.
Yeah, one of their directors at IPPR, his name's Guy Lodge, praised the French unified civil service, saying it guarantees that senior officials are exposed to other parts of public service in local and regional government, giving them direct experience of public service delivery. At the very least, Britain should ensure that central government officials spend more of their careers in local governments and other parts of the public sector.
Well, key question here, I would have thought, is why is it that Britain suddenly needs to take advice from all of these other countries?
Exactly.
We've managed to look after ourselves for a very long time, but now suddenly, according to Francis Maude and Kerslake
and the IPPR,
we've actually got to go and see how other people do it.
Yep.
And of course, the theme is change, and what we're actually looking at here, and we'll introduce this. This document, which was very kindly sent to us this morning, in fact. But this is a document, it's called Informing Civil Society, Beyond the Radar, Love, Passion and Fun, the conference report, July 2011. But if you look into this document, what they're actually talking about is setting up networks of change agents through Britain in order to change the views and values of everybody in society. And that includes the civil servants, the civil service, it includes people in local authority, it includes people in communities. And beyond the radar or underneath the radar, if you read this document, what you're actually looking at is subversion. You're looking at people who are not accountable to the electorate. These people are deciding how Britain should be changed. And of course, this is what these senior military people who are tied up to UK NDA simply do not understand, that Britain is presently being taken apart from the inside. Who's supporting this document that we've got on screen? Well, it's the Barrow Cadbury Trust, and I hope the viewers and listeners will go and have a look at Barrow Cadbury Trust, have a look at the men and women involved. I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong, but do have a look at their backgrounds and see what they have ever done, which is actually, described as a mainstream job, and why these people are being commissioned by Francis Maude's Cabinet Office to do studies in how we network change agents. Yeah. And if anybody out there doesn't think that I'm telling the truth, this is a page from that document where above it's showing how these networks should be set up across the country, and it tells you exactly what these people are, agents of change.
Julia Middleton's book.
Straight out of Julia Middleton's book and straight out of government Saul Alinsky policy. So we are seeing at the moment Britain being attacked from the inside, and it's quite evident that we've got our own politicians driving the thing. It's quite incredible, really.
Yeah.
Well, we probably need something on economy, and I think Mike is in the background ready to speak on that.
He's the man.
Well, this was the news this morning that consumer price index has dropped to 2.5% from 2.6%, and my initial response to that was whoopee-doo.
Woohoo!
But the key phrase that I wanted to take out of that document was the largest, so the quote is, the largest downward pressure behind the change in the CPI rate came from furniture, household equipment and maintenance, housing and household services, particularly domestic gas, and clothing and footwear. These were partially offset by an upward pressure from transport, particularly motor fuels. And really the story here for me is just that the prices of fundamental goods that we need for life are continuing to rise. The prices of things that we don't particularly need are continuing to fall, and that seems to represent to me a continuation of the sort of general collapse in the economy. Most people that are living on a basic salary are going to continue to struggle over the next period of time because the prices of fundamentals are going up, and that's really the point I wanted to make. It's really the luxury goods that the prices are continuing to fall on.
Right. And we're going to continue on this theme of reporting reality with jobs and food prices and what's happening in the financial world, because they simply are not being reported on mainstream media, or indeed in most of the mainstream press. So if we can ask viewers and people who are now supporting UK Column Live, if you think that what we're talking about makes sense and you've got concerns and you'd like to take some form of action, one of the most powerful things you can do is start to actually challenge organisations like the BBC and the mainstream papers and ask why they are not reporting these absolutely vital subjects. Pressure does work, particularly with a lot of people, and certainly if these questions and comments go up on the blogs and you know these phrases better than I do.
Yeah, on the blogs and the forums.
Forums, thank you. That's the word. Okay. And you've got another particularly disturbing subject, Mike, on eugenics.
Right, so yesterday's Today programme, Professor Lisa Jardine was on promoting the principle of three-person IVF, and this is where an embryo has a fertilized embryo has the core of it pulled out and put into a third party's egg or embryo. So that means that there are three sets of genetic material in the developing embryo. Now, the reason that they're suggesting that this is a good idea is to help with to help people that have genetic problems and who can't have children of their own because of these genetic problems. And the problem that I have with this, if you just show the next slide, I'll show the lady herself. So this is the lady, she's the head of the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority. And the problem that I have with this in general is that while on one hand they're saying that this is for the benefit of humanity and the benefit of people that are struggling to have children with certain, when they've got a history of certain genetic problems in their family, I don't see how this fits with the general policy of the Optimum Population Trust and the sort of British establishment, which is pushing this idea that we've got too many people in the world. So for that reason, I don't think that this is really anything to do with helping people that have genetic problems having children of their own. I think this is attempting to encourage people to think about genetic modification in humans. This is a precursor to bringing back a policy of eugenics. I'm deeply uncomfortable with this whole thing, whereas I'm normally extremely in favour of using technology to help humanity. In this case, I'm uncomfortable with the thinking behind behind this whole thing. So what this lady is proposing is an open dialogue, and I think people need to get involved with that if they think that there are dangers in what she's proposing.
That's really dangerous.
Yeah, it is worrying that we have these initiatives, and the thing that I constantly feel is that we have scientists, we have doctors, we have so-called experts telling us that they know the procedure's safe, when in fact time and a bit of history tells us that they absolutely don't know what they're playing. Who is she?
Yeah, who is she? What's her background?
Well, it's quite interesting. I mean, she I can't remember her father's name. You can look it up, but her father was a sort of ethicist, scientific ethics kind of guy. She's a historian. And I'm not.
Not a doctor, no.
No, and I'm not quite sure. Other than her family connections to her father and the work that he was doing with scientific ethics, I'm not quite sure how she ended up as being head of the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority. So it's. I think there's a bit of work to do to work out what is actually going on there, but
she's speaking at one point. I believe there's a little audio clip on the internet where you can hear her speaking, and in it she indicates, you correct me if I'm not remembering this right, but she indicates that basically we need to get this debate into the public arena because it will help inform the debate. It's nudging, isn't that nudging what this woman is doing?
I believe it is. Actually, the previous slide had there's no need to go back to it, but the previous slide had the URL for the which has the recording of the Today programme, and I urge everybody to listen to that.
I'm just going to put it in the chat room actually.
And when the archive of this show goes up, you can see that again. But I do urge everybody to listen to it. I believe that's exactly what they're doing. They're softening up people's attitudes, or at least they're attempting to soften up people's attitudes, or at least gauge where they're at with the public view on this,
right?
And get a view of what people think. I think there are dangers in this, and we need to be
and dangers in these people. Really,
Yes.
Who are they? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Well, we've got a couple of minutes left. This is a Telegraph article which is very topical for UK Column Live because we've done a number of reports over the dangers of the use of drones. And in this one, the Telegraph is reporting that I just need my glasses for this, Lord MacDonald of River Glaven. I don't know why we can't call these people by their real names. I don't want to be facetious, but it sounds like something out of Harry Potter. But this gentleman has actually been speaking out and asking questions about how GCHQ, so the government's listening post, has been providing information to help the Americans target drones. And his point is, this gentleman's a Liberal Democrat peer, that's who he is. But he's actually saying that GCHQ and the British government are sharing information which is then being used to target drones which are then killing innocent people. Yeah. And is the British government starting to break criminal rules? criminal laws about this. And I think this is very, very topical, particularly as we now see drones starting to come into the press, a bit of nudging that they should be used by the police.
Exactly.
And at some stage I predict that they're going to be armed in this country. The drones are going to be armed. Yeah.
They're being used a lot in America now, aren't they?
Yeah.
A lot.
Do you want to just comment in the last few minutes on the Ian Tomlinson case?
Yeah. The family, apparently, well, this is in the Daily Record in Scotland, the families walked out of the court after the police hearing in disgust after the panel reject their plea to consider that the sack riot caused Ian's death. But he has been struck off, I think.
Yes, he has.
Yeah, he has been struck off.
So he's lost his job.
He's lost his job, but they are still saying he isn't solely responsible.
Yeah. So, Mike.
He lost his job, but he kept his pension.
Yes,
That's the really
correct.
sickening thing about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we've got another example here. We do find this difficult, but the UK column is sticking up for British police, and we'd always like to thank the British police men and women who are coming to us with information and concerns. We're not making this up, they're out there, and we're very, very grateful for those good people. But really, we've got a situation now, we've seen it in Hillsborough, where police officers are letting their colleagues down by lying, cheating, falsifying documents. Here is this man. The ordinary member of the public would say he attacked a member of the public. As a result, the man died. Criminal charges what's happened? Nothing. So the families are describing this as a whitewash. We're nearly seeing elements of the police out of control. And of course, in the last few days, UK column has done a special report on a lady called Elaine up in Scotland who has been horrifically assaulted and abused. And she's told her own story live with us, where she's saying there is no justice north of the border and the police are complicit. So we've actually flagged up that Fife Constabulary, and in fact I can say this afternoon, Tayside Constabulary are now responsible for the physical safety of this lady. So if you're a member of the police, please check on what we're reporting, and we'll say to you, somebody's got to clean the mess up in the police. Somebody has got to deal with police complaints, and ACPO, operating as a private company, it's got to be properly sworn in police officers. Definitely,
yeah, not G4S.
Not G4S people, absolutely.
Private security firms.
Okay, anything to add?
Well, no, I'll do my vaccine story tomorrow because it's something close to my heart, so we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Okay.
In the meantime, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Thank you.
Goodbye.